If you're going to write something and you know it completely, don't bother.
I'm interested in knowing that a writer is taking risks even if they aren't pulling it off entirely. I suppose in my work the most stark example of writing the unfamiliar was with my fifth novel, Burnt Shadows, which starts in Nagasaki the day the bomb falls in 1945. I'd never been to Nagasaki, I'd never been to 1945. I'd never been a Japanese woman. I sort of tricked myself into doing it because the novel was supposed to be set in contemporary Pakistan, which is what I know. But I had the idea that a character would have a Japanese grandmother, and at a certain point I became interested in her. And that was actually the beginning of moving away from just writing about the world I'd grown up in for me.
If there are things that you're good at, those are gifts. Don't squander them. If I have an idea and I feel terrified by it, I need to give it a chance.
I grew up reading books that were set in countries I didn't know. And I think, for me, that makes more sense. That I grew up in Karachi, I was reading books set in Colombia, in America, in Britain. So that fiction for me really was a place where other places happened. And I suspect that may be what drew me to the idea of writing away from my own biographical experience. The novelist Peter Hobbs has written a novel set in the north of Pakistan called In the Orchards, the Swallows. This book, which is really wonderful and captured the sense of place. But what was interesting to me is when I read it, I said to him, you really worked in the local stories, so the story of Layla and Majnu and Sassi and Pannu, which are very deeply embedded love stories. I said, you worked those in so well. And he said, I have to confess, I needed to Google those stories. I don't know what you meant. I thought I was working off Romeo and Juliet.
You write to learn. You're not just writing because the world deserves to hear your voice. I mean, no one, I think, starts with that position.
I studied creative writing at university. And I was often asked, can you be taught to be a writer? And I'd say, no, but you can't be taught to be an artist either. And no one seems to have the same problem with art schools. I think, you can't be taught to be a singer, you can't be taught to be a ceramicist. I would argue, I don't think anyone could teach me to be a physicist. I don't think my brain works that way. So of course there is a quality of what you already come in knowing. I fully acknowledge and understand the dangers of a certain kind of teaching which tries to set down rules of how fiction should be done, and wants to overwork the individual sentences without really looking at what is at the core of something. So certainly writing can be badly taught, like anything else. I always find the most helpful thing are photographs, actually. You need to be able to see the place. This idea that people are inherently different from one place to another, I don't think there's a nation where there aren't stubborn human beings, for instance. But how that stubbornness might play out or how it might be received, of course, those things vary. But I'm less worried about the cultural specificity than I am about being able to see the world in order to write it, in order to place my characters in it.
Foremost, remember this, you are writing a novel. You are not writing an ethnographic survey, you are not an anthropologist.
So I do get obsessive. I think that is the first key, is you have to be a little bit obsessive. So you just read everything you can around the subject. But you need to find those photographs. You need that very strong visual sense. What were people wearing? What was the weather like? What flowers were growing? That sort of thing to create the world on the page. Where to stop? I don't know. I suppose you have to rely on some internal sense, which is saying, actually now I'm using research as a means of procrastination. I need to put words on the page, because I actually find that I carry on researching while I'm writing, so it's not as though there's the block of research. Because while I'm writing, I'm constantly discovering new things I need to know, and then I'm going back to research, and sometimes the research, you turn up some new piece of information and you think, oh, that could change the course of the novel, and you sort of go with that. You can't go in thinking, well, I pretty much know this already. You have to go in saying, I know nothing, now I learn.